Hey everyone, today I will be talking about subjects of sex, gender, desire, the first chapter of Judith Butler's book, Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity. Published in 1990, Gender Trouble argues against the foundation upon which feminism stands and is arguably one of the most influential works ever written on feminism and queer theory. In this chapter, Butler makes two critical points. One, that both gender and sex are social constructions, and two, that gender is performative. Her second idea about gender performativity was radically different from anything previously published and has revolutionized our understanding of sex and gender today. Butler begins her argument for these 2 points by claiming that feminism has made a mistake in trying to make women the subject of their approach. In trying to assert that all women are a group with a common identity, feminists undermine their own argument. She argues that if one is a woman, that is surely not all that one is. The term fails to be exhaustive because gender intersects with racial, class, ethnic, sexual, and regional modalities of discursively constituted identities. In other words, Butler's problem with feminism is that it clubs all women into one category even though there are many different factors that make up each woman. Although there is no universal woman that could represent all women as a whole, feminists previously had to use this stance in order to gain political visibility because women were misrepresented, underrepresented, or not represented at all in society. Still, she argues that feminist critique ought also to understand how the category of woman, the subject of feminism, is produced and restrained by the very structures of power through which emancipation is sought. Instead of allowing a person to choose her own identity, feminism divides human beings into two clear-cut categories, women and men. However, these categories are only stable within what Butler calls the heterosexual matrix, or the culture that maintains normative heterosexuality and traditional gender roles. Butler further contends that the traditional system of feminism is self-defeating because the universality presumed by feminism parallels the assumed universality of the patriarchy. Thus, there is no universal basis for feminism, and in trying to create a unified identity, feminists ironically perpetuate the very social constructs that they want to tear down. Butler suggests that there needs to be a radical change. Perhaps, paradoxically, representation will be shown to make sense for feminism only when the subject of woman is nowhere to be presumed. This call for change begins Butler's first main point. Although gender is usually thought of as a social construct and sex as a biological process, Butler contends that both gender and sex are social constructions. She argues against the traditional understanding that gender, society's understanding of masculinity and femininity, is derived from sex. She argues that because gender is a social construct and not natural, and since we understand biological sex in terms of gender, it too is a social construct. We understand sex through gendered language and through societal expectations of male and female. Therefore, sex exists in relation to gender, not outside of it. This brings us to the crux of Butler's argument that gender is performative. She says that gender is a repeated stylization of the body, a set of repeated acts within a highly rigid regulatory frame that congeal over time to produce the appearance of a substance. In other words, we traditionally believe that our sex dictates how we act. We act a certain way because we are male or female. Butler wants us to turn that thought upside down. She says that how we act constructs our gender. For example, I think that I should act a certain way because I'm a woman. However, Butler claims that I'm a woman because I act a certain way. Through repeating acts, words, and discourses, we ourselves create and define what it means to be masculine or feminine. Gender itself does not create performance. Performance creates gender. Therefore, gender is not something you are, it's something you do. Butler ends by saying that we shouldn't take traditional societal constructs at face value. By questioning the foundations of identity that try to keep gender in its place, we can overthrow the perceptions of gender that support the heterosexual matrix or masculine authority. She calls us to make a ruckus about preconceived notions of identity, sex, and gender. In other words, she calls us to make some gender trouble.